We're just going to have a quick discussion now here up on the stage, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the floor, and we'll have roving mics. So if you do think you want to have a question, put up your hand and just identify yourself when you do. But first, if I can just try and pick up, one of the big ideas of this whole showcase is to try and narrow the gap between industry and all of those public opportunities there are for collaboration, whether it's the Institutes of Technology or through funding. Given the length of time IBM has been in the business, how did you work it out? What were the key stages you think that would be of interest to people who are here?
Yeah, so I think in our case we started small. We started with an Irish Research Council master's type program. The government funds 2/3, we funded 1/3. We did a number of those. And then we kept trying to figure out how to go bigger. So, our first R&D capability grant was a certain size. After that, I've tried to figure out how to do bigger things, Then, we tried to reach out to Science Foundation Ireland centres. And we tried not to just reach out, but also how could we leverage them? Frank talked about, we put some management processes around it, sort of check-in. So we tried to figure out how do we leverage. And we also tried to figure out, you don't really talk to the centres. I think you talk to individuals. You don't talk to university, you talk to individuals. You don't really talk to IBM, you talk to someone in IBM, and you try to use those, I think, to figure out how to work the system. And then if you talk to Enterprise Ireland, IDA, SFI, they know how to work the system as well. So here's what I want to do. Tell me how I can do it. Go over to the Horizon 2020 stand. I want to do something in security. What should I be thinking about now? So started small and then kept building and building. And now if I think about it, we've won X amount of Horizon 2020 projects. My thought process is, how do I win a bigger one? So if I set a target, and I set targets financially, I think I want to get X amount of money from this, and I want it strategically align as well, which I think is important. It must align strategically to what you want to do. Otherwise, all the incentives and all of the benefits do not materialize.
I mean, Horizon 2020 is an incredible program where for SMEs there isn't a barrier. You can go in and negotiate directly yourself at this stage. But when you say meeting people, to people who are here, you may get the chance to at a conference, but how did you go actually out, identify I want to talk to that man or woman and then nail it?
So I think you just do the traditional Irish thing. You actually just go and find them. It's very easy to find them. There's a directory floating around. But, I think there are more. I think the opportunity is more what not to do, So there are loads of conferences, there's loads of events, there's loads of committees, there's loads of communities. I think you can pick and choose those, but then figure out which ones are beneficial. So personally, I sit on the governing of LERO, so I understand LERO very well. We're actively engaged with Infant, so I understand it very well. I sit in the Irish Software Association, so I understand the Indigenous company activities reasonably well. I'm not expert, but I understand it reasonably well. So, but I think, you just go and ask. The worst thing is someone can say no. They can ignore you, but it's a bit like, dating. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. This is very much a dating game, I think, as well, but it's a dating game with a purpose, and you don't necessarily have to like each other, but you have to find a mutual win. So, and I think that's important. It's not just enough to get something for you as industry. You must also understand publications, understand academia, understand centres, and they must win as well. And if you go with that attitude, they will win and we will win, then you can be successful.
Julie,
and actually, the other thing as well is, I would say, they need you equally as much as you need them. So, their funding is very much dependent on you working with them as well.
Julie, you're in a new space. You're just effectively starting up. So how are you finding that synergy between the state and the business that you want to transact?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly feel the pain of all the startups here where effectively it is such an overwhelming environment and so many different opportunities to figure out, well, how do I go about this? So I think it's first of all figuring out, I think it starts small. I think that's exactly it. I mean, some of these things are monsters. You've got to start small. You often maybe start as a minor player in a bigger project, so you learn your way into it. I think the other thing I would say is in terms of trying to figure out who is out there doing the things that you've got an objective to get there. But I think the other thing is trying to work with organizations that the culture is going to fit yours as well, because I think certainly in the beginnings of your organization you're trying to figure out what your culture is, and if you end up partnering up with an institution that doesn't match your culture, that's very difficult to recover from, easy to knock your confidence in the early days. So I think figuring out the culture of the organization you're going to partner with is very important as well.
And is that just instinctive, you're saying, figuring out, or is that just hard work, going in, knocking on doors, meeting people, making the evaluation, and then making a determination on it?
I think it's use the network. I mean, you can certainly go in and knock on the doors, but you're going to have a conversation at a time. So Enterprise Ireland, IDA, whoever you're working with, can help you to figure that out. So I think what I find is you go in and you have a conversation and they will go, you talk about, here's what I want to do and here's how I think I would like to do it. And they'll either go, yes, I know the perfect people for you to talk to. I think you'll like them. I think you'll get on. I think the culture will be right. But also say, well, you know, you're thinking about that, but have you thought about this tangential opportunity? And I think those connections and the power, I guess, of the smaller Irish ecosystem to be able to help you navigate that is really powerful.
Frank, you've worked both sides. You're both a company, but you've also worked assisting companies. How improved do you think things are now when it comes to assisting startups, getting them up and running, and hopefully bringing products to market?
You know, when you're talking to anyone, it's all about initially communication. So, in other words, if you have a project and you have an idea that you want to evolve and develop, right? You're going to have to go out and find people that will engage with that idea, that strategy, if you like, to give it a more collective and far-out term. The ideas that you have to find someone that you can actually communicate with properly. And let's be realistic. You're not going to get on with everyone in the world. There's some people even would say that I'm hard to get on with. I don't understand it all. But the net result is you do need to find someone that you can actually communicate with, that will speak with you, speak your language. In other words, if I spoke about injection molding, I can tell you words in injection molding. It's a separate language, right? If I'm talking about thermal infrared heating and radiation, it's a separate language. So if that guy doesn't speak your language, you know, why in God's name would you spend any time wasting your time talking to him? Find someone that does speak your language, and you will find them. In Enterprise Ireland will help you, universities will help you, and this is the biggest issue of all that has to be resolved. In other words, how does that communication take place? And if you get that correct, then the projects will flow.
There's quite a difference between business and university or business and institutes of technologies. We do have these spin-outs, they are getting closer, but how do you make that cooperation work when two entities are coming from different approaches?
There's as the old saying goes, there's horses for courses, right? And as long as you can develop your program and strategy of development, you can essentially take on board specific types of individuals that essentially will give you expertise in a certain area. And during that period of time, as I called it, the CMM qualification can make money. It's like turning around and an engineer walks in the door to you and he's being interviewed, and the first thing you do is you catch a bunch of screws and you put them on the table and you ask him, how much do those cost? And most of the engineers couldn't tell you. But you know what? I buy thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of euros of those every year. So I expect the engineers and the developers not to come up with an idea that's not going to make me money, but an idea that will make money. That's the culture that you create within the actual project, within the environment that you're creating. It's different from me. It's not the same in every company. Mm-hmm. But that's the type of culture that I'm trying to create.
And Julie, how are you navigating that as well when you are, obviously you're operating a different connection to Ceramicx. How do you work it?
I mean, I'd agree with Frank. I'd probably say it in a different way. I mean, I think in anything you're doing from a business point of view, bringing diversity to the table makes sense. So whether it's working with universities and a business together, you know, and potentially one of the research agencies, everyone comes at things from a different point of view. And I think when you can get that collective sort of diverse set of mindsets together, I really think your ability to move faster, which is often very important for startups, but to get that scale much quicker is really important. And for us, what we see is, I mean, our idea is to get up to 200 people and spend 25 million in the next year, and we don't have all those skills and expertise, and we don't necessarily want to hire and have them on permanent staff. So that partnership with universities is an absolute way to open the door, have that effectively skills and expertise very deep on staff, effectively working with us straight away. So I think it's about having lots of different people with different mindsets and diversity coming to the table.
Just to ask you the same question as well, how do you approach it?
Yeah, so
How have you approached it?
Yeah, so I think about it a little bit as follows. So in my opinion, the best people in the world can make things simple. So I ask people, can you explain it in 2 minutes? Okay, and then if I go and I talk to someone in academia and they can't explain something in 2 minutes, then I figure they're not so good. Now, they may be very good, but they're not very good if they can't explain it. And I use the same criteria internally. So that's one thought process. So I think there is an ability to, the best people in the world can make complex things simple. You know, and if people can't make complex things simple, then it's very hard to move forward. But the other thing, because I'm looking here and I want to highlight this, I'm looking over at the design. So we're putting a lot of effort this year around design. You know, we've had ID 2015, IBM has opened a new design studio. So I think design is also focused on making things simple. You know, so very much we have new ideas, but those ideas are probably used by users who won't necessarily know as much about the ideas as the people who created them. So there's a big focus on matching, I think, engineering, design, and users. And then in design, I think the big focus as well is on having real people, you know, because you can always design to hypothetical users, like, you know, someone who looks like me, okay, who does all the things that I do, but doesn't exist. Or someone like, you know, who's a real user with a real name, with a real personality as well. So I do think so. Communications, but simplicity. So if you can't explain it in 2 minutes, and if anyone takes longer than 2 minutes, you know, all your speakers today and the big ideas, they explain in 2 minutes. I was in the event awards in Northern Ireland, they gave them 1 minute, so you guys were generous, you gave twice the time, you know, but 1 minute. And also focus, I think, you know, because there, you know, there was a £1,000 prize. You know, so what was the big idea? Was it to get your idea across or to win the £1,000 prize? Really the idea was to win the £1,000 prize. The person that won came up and said a poem. Does anyone remember what he said? No, but it was a great poem, and he won the prize. So, you know, sometimes it's also not just what you want to communicate, but also what are you trying to achieve? So it could be in some cases to actually develop a partnership, some cases to get money, and also telling people a little bit about what they want to hear. So understand what they want to hear and then tell them a little bit about that as well. So simplicity, understanding the conversation, and understanding success as well from their point of view, I think is important.
Well, you gave a challenge there of being able to say something simple in 60 seconds, so I'm going to knock it straight back at you.
Yep.
Just as a wrap-up and a final thing, to those who are startups, who are looking to bring things to the market, who are trying to engage with the universities and the institutes of technology, what's the key thing? 60 seconds.
2 things, 30 seconds. Strategy, what's your strategy? And then what in the ecosystem could help your strategy? And that's who more than anything. So, you know, who, and then look at the incentives around that. But look at the incentives third. So think of strategy, think of who, and then think of the incentives to help there. Hopefully that was 30 seconds.
A bit more, I'd say, but Julie?
I would say probably similar. I would say figure out so what are the areas you need to focus on and who does that. Second thing I would say, use the intermediaries that we have, the IDAs, the SFIs, the Enterprise Ireland, because they know who's doing what, and it's your fast track to get to the right people.
Last word?
Yeah, determination. Be determined to make it work, and essentially be very careful that you don't believe your own propaganda.
That sounds like a good place to end. Frank, Julie, Bill, thank you very much. We're going to take a break on the main stage, but I'll be back with a few announcements in a couple of minutes. Thank you.